Tommy Jaggi of Fansided here with Marcus Mosher on the No Huddle show on Stacking the Box. We are going to talk about the NFL draft today. The 2025 draft is in the books. We're going to talk about our winners and losers. And Marcus, I don't want to bury the lead here because everybody's going to want to talk about Shedeur Sanders as well. So we will get that out of
Is he
the
a
way
loser?
and talk about, I mean, I would say, considering he thought that he was going to be one of the top picks in the draft, it just goes to show you can't mess around during this pre-draft process. And I think he really hurt himself with how he interviewed, with kind of declining some of those interviews from teams. Fell all the way to the 5th round. I don't think anybody saw this coming. Is this the biggest draft surprise that we've ever seen?
Probably. Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about Shedeur Sanders. I think from an NFL scout perspective, it wasn't shocking to see him slip out of round one. I know there were a couple of
Yeah.
people talking about him maybe being more of a second or third round pick, but for him to fall all the way to day 3, that part of it was shocking because I don't think he's a day 3 talent. I think he's a more of a day 2 talent. But when you combine the fact that maybe he was a little abrasive in some of the interviews, he turned down potential interviews. There were only a couple landing spots, and once those teams passed or drafted another quarterback, he just ran out of options really quickly. So this couldn't have gone worse for Shedeur Sanders. I feel bad for him because he's not a 5th round quarterback, but the NFL draft says he is.
Yeah, and you see a trend coming this direction where it's like, all right, we're either going to take our quarterbacks really high in the draft, or a lot of times these guys will slip now. I think that teams are wising up to the fact that if you don't believe in a guy as a franchise player, use your capital elsewhere. It's why guys like Will Howard, Kyle McCord go tail end of the draft, Quinn Ewers. I mean, so if you don't believe that they're a franchise player, they're going to slip. And the guys who already wanted quarterbacks typically took them by that point. You either took him or you were out on Shedeur. And so that draft slide ended up being pretty major for him. And it's almost like you get to day 3, Marcus, and it's like, all right, now does this guy just become like a distraction in our locker room? Like all the media is going to want to ask about Shedeur. Like everything's going to be about Shedeur. The focus of the team, obviously, they're going to want it to be, oh, what about my first round draft pick? What about the status of our team? And so does he reach that like distraction level for Cleveland now that he fell this far?
No. And I think this is why. He's a 5th round pick. We see 5th round picks get cut all the time before they make it to week 1 of their rookie year, right? So I don't think Shedeur can afford to be a distraction because if he is, he's gone. They already drafted Dylan Gabriel in the 3rd round. They have Joe Flacco. They have Kenny Pickett. I think if he's any distraction at all, or if he's just not living up to, let's say he doesn't beat out Dylan Gabriel in camp and he's not better than Kenny Pickett and he's not Joe Flacco, they're just going to cut him and move on. So I don't think he's going to be a distraction, but the leash is pretty short now for Shedeur. Like he's got to come in and play really, really well. There can't be any missteps now.
It is just absolutely wild that we're even talking about Shedeur Sanders and being cut in the same sentence. Like this wouldn't have happened back in February. It wouldn't have happened a week ago. But your opportunities are tied to your draft status. Like if you're a day 3 pick, you're going to get treated like a day 3 pick by your organization. And so it doesn't matter everybody's pre-draft thoughts about Shedeur at this point. The fact that he fell to the 5th round shows that he is not even a lock to make the roster. I would assume that he would. He's talented enough to, and I think he's a good quarterback overall. But yeah, his opportunities are going to be limited because of that. Marcus, let's talk about the winners from the draft. And let's go back and forth maybe. And you can share one, I'll share one. We'll talk about our reasoning and we'll see if you have a rebuttal, see if you disagree with me. But I think I've got more on the list here. So let me pop this off first with one of my winners. And I've got the Chicago Bears as a winner. And I don't know what you think about that, but I thought they killed it with their first 2 picks. The most Ben Johnson picks imaginable, though. You go Colston Loveland and Luther Burden. Both of those guys, excellent value on my boards. Loveland was my 8th overall player. Burden was my 12th. I thought the consensus was far too low on Burden, considering what he offers in his yak ability. So getting 2 dynamic weapons instantly to add to Ben Johnson's offense, you're looking like you're back in Detroit already.
I mean, I'm never going to say a bad thing about Luther Burden. So of course I love their draft and I love Colston Loveland as well. He was my number 1 tight end in this class. I do. There is part of me that wonders, like, okay, there is a point where you have too many weapons. And I know that's crazy to say, but there's so many different mouths to feed in this offense now with
Mm.
DJ Moore, who you're paying like a top flight receiver, Roma Dunze, who you took in the top 10, Colson Loveland now, who's a top 10 tight end, Cole Kmet, who they've signed, and now it's Luther Burden. I get the idea of surrounding your quarterback with a ton of playmakers, and that's why no matter what, you can't say a ton bad about this because now they've got one of the best situations in the league. Still got to stop some people, right? Like this defense still needs a lot of work,
Mm.
but those two picks, outstanding value, outstanding players. I just don't see how they're not productive right away in the NFL.
Yeah, and I think that the too many weapons thing is a good problem to have in the NFL. And I think that I wasn't surprised to see them focus on the offensive side of the ball. You bring in
No.
one of the most coveted offensive minds in the league to run that. You better make sure that you're scoring points. And so we'll see how that turns out. So, Marcus, I'll ask you, what is one of the winners that you had from the 2025 draft?
I think there's a lot of times where we overreact to the depth of a class. If we see guys that we like in the third, fourth, fifth
Mm.
round, and that we inflate it, where a lot of times your draft is only successful based on what you do in the first and second round. And that's why I love what the New York Jets did. At pick number 7, Armand Membu. I thought he was the best tackle in the class. He's a perfect fit at right tackle. They drafted
Yes.
Olaf Ashanu in the first round last year. They're building up their offensive line. And without a franchise quarterback, that's the best strategy forward. They didn't take a swing on Shedeur or Tyler Shuck. I think they realized, hey, we've got Justin Fields as a stopgap. Let's make sure our offensive line is built to run the ball. I love the pick of Membu
Mhm.
at 7. And then in the second round, Mason Taylor. And I think the combination of these two guys, I thought Mason Taylor had a chance to go in round 1. He's just a really good all-around tight end. He's a very good athlete. He'll block. He'll make plays in space. The Jets have not had a tight end like this in a while. They added 2 guys to their offense that I think are going to help and improve that unit right away. And then you look at the rest of their draft, Azare Thomas, a corner from Florida State. I think that's
Mhm.
fine. Arian Smith, a receiver from Georgia, who's really fast. Malachi Moore, a safety that could come in and potentially start for them. But the Membu and Mason Taylor pick, I absolutely love.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Membu was one of my favorite overall players in the class. I think he profiles as a long-time starting tackle at either side with Pro Bowl upside, and Mason Taylor giving Justin Fields another weapon right now. But this is a play. Both of these, Marcus, I think are plays for the future, that if Justin Fields is not your quarterback next year, the year after, whatever, you are still getting some cornerstone offensive pieces here. And this offense has been just abysmal for so long. Like, they've got to build that side of the football up. So I really like what they did as well. I agree with you there, Marcus. I hate to do this. I hate to do this, but I'm going to go ahead and give your team a little pat on the back here for what they did. The Dallas Cowboys in the draft. I know a lot of people don't like their first round pick, Tyler Booker. I think a lot of people believe that it was a reach pick. I know a lot of people could care less about what they did on day 3 of the draft. Bunch of guys you probably never heard of. You can go check them out for yourself. But I like the Booker pick a lot more than most. And I think that they had the best day 2 of the class with getting Donovan Ezerico and Siobhan Revel. Like, those 2 players to me were easily top 35, 40 players in the class. And the value they found there was tremendous. I think that you're obviously you're taking an injury risk with Revel. He's a small school guy coming off an ACL, but the traits are undeniable. I mean, you're getting like the Tariq Woolen package where you're 6'3", long arms, freak athlete. And then Ezerico was pound for pound, maybe the best overall, just pure pass rusher in this class. Might not be the fastest, but quick, bendy, super productive. So I love those picks. And then Tyler Booker is so much better than the athletic testing numbers would suggest. And he's a lot better than like what his PFF grades would suggest too. You put on the film and you just see a guy that doesn't lose, particularly in pass sets, just as an anchor there. And I think he's going to be a foundational piece for that offensive line. Even if it was the wrong mentality to draft a guard with the 12th overall pick, I still like what they did the first 3 picks.
I struggle with the Cowboys class because you're right. I like the day 2 picks, Donovan Ezeraku and Siobhan Revel. Those should be, in theory, 2 defensive starters at money 5 positions, right? Maybe Revel takes a year or so to get going, but you don't find corners with his length and athletic ability very often. Can't say obviously anything wrong about Ezeraku. He's going to be a starter. My problem is that their biggest need going into the offseason was getting a number 2 pass catcher to pair with CeeDee Lamb. Coming out of their draft, their biggest need is a number 2 pass catcher to get with CeeDee Lamb. And I'm not saying that you should only draft based on need, because that's how you
Mm.
draft poorly. But I just wonder, even if they get 3 starters at this class at guard, edge, and cornerback, I wonder if it moves the needle enough, because their offense is just so limited when it comes to playmakers. I think they had a good draft, but not a needle moving draft for me.
Well, Marcus, on that point though, it's like, all right, second round pick rolls around, and yes, we could have gone a number of different directions in the first. A trade back would have been awesome for Dallas, and maybe you still get Booker, or maybe you get Gray Zabel or someone else in a trade back and pick up an extra day 2 pick. Like, I think that was the best route they could have taken. But like when it comes to the second round, it's like Luther Burden's off the board at this point. The receiver drops a tier for me for sure, maybe 2 tiers at that point, and you are legitimately just taking the BPA approach. And I love that about Dallas, but I do agree with you. Weapons a little bit scary. Something happens to CD, this team is ruined. Like their 25 season is done. So for that reason, yes, they needed receiver help, but I think that they definitely took the right approach in round 2. I think the question becomes, like with Booker, was that the right decision there? I still think that you're getting probably 3 foundational pieces when it's all said and done in this draft for Dallas. And I think that whatever happens with the rest of the class doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah, and they're obviously hoping Jaden Blue, the running back they drafted from Texas, he's not going to be a full-time guy, but they're hoping he can be the most important player in a running back by committee approach. So we'll see. I'm maybe a little bit more down on that class, but one class that I absolutely loved, and you could put this as my favorite class, is what the New England Patriots did. Now, at pick number 4, they were in a tough spot. They needed an offensive tackle. The draft really dropped off after the first 3 players. Will Campbell, I think, is like a B+ pick, right? Like it's fine. They needed an offensive tackle. But one of the things I like to do when I evaluate these classes is, can you see what their plan was? Did they have a clear goal going into the draft? And for New England, that was to address their offense. Their offense was just bad last year. They needed more playmakers. They needed more help on that side of the ball. So what did they do? Pick round 1, pick 4, Will Campbell. You got your left tackle. Worst case scenario, he's a guard. Round 2, Travion Henderson. They already had Ramondre Stevenson, but now they bring in Henderson, and that's a really good 1-2 punch. Somebody that doesn't fumble. He can help pass protect. He can make plays in the passing game. You add a dynamic weapon on an offense that just doesn't have a lot of them. And then in round 3, Kyle Williams, one of my favorite receivers in this class, maybe doesn't profile as a number 1, but somebody who can play on the outside, can play in the slot, gets open all the time. It reminds me a lot of Emmanuel Sanders. And now with Stephon Diggs and Kyle Williams and hopefully Jalen Polk, you're starting to have a semblance of a receiver core that makes sense. And then in round 3, again, at the back half of that round, Jared Wilson, a center out of Georgia, maybe not a day 1 starter, but somebody that can improve the offensive line depth. You've added 2 guys on the offensive line and 2 playmakers. I love what New England did in this draft.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that the only thing that I would have done differently if I was the Patriots is I would have taken Membu there instead of Will Campbell. I just think he is a safer play at tackle, where there's a lot of people that project Campbell inside to guard, and you can understand why. Even like him walking out on stage, or you can just see his build. The short arms are a little bit concerning. I know that there's some guys like Bernard Ryman in the NFL that are working out with a similar profile. I might have gone a different direction there. But yeah, they had an identity. They had something that they wanted to do, which is build an offense around Drake May, your promising young quarterback. And I think that they did that. Travion's going to be able to hit some home run plays there from the running back position. And then you and I know we're higher on Kyle Williams in the consensus. He's just a good football player, can separate, can do some yards after the catch stuff. I think he could be potential go-to option in that offense. So they definitely took a pretty sizable leap forward, I would say, on the offensive side of the ball, which they needed to, because they have been maybe the worst offense in the league over the last couple of years. So I definitely like what they did there. I've got one more team, Marcus, on the winners list. And I don't know if you're going to agree with this one or not, but I put the Seattle Seahawks here. So I'm not, I mean, the Gray Zabel pick at pick 18, you could argue that's a little bit of a reach. Even you're taking a North Dakota State guy that early in the draft. He had a really good Senior Bowl, but it was what they did the rest of the draft. I think they just kind of found value everywhere, and they had a lot of picks. And so that definitely helps. but you get Nick Emanwari in the second round, which I was not on board in round 1 at all, but you take him in the second round. I think that he is going to be a tone setter on the defense there. Elijah Arroyo, who I like nearly as much as Mason Graham, they got him in the second round. Jalen Milroe, you take your quarterback stab and it doesn't cost you much. The 92nd overall pick in the draft. And if it doesn't work out, then maybe you get a guy that you can just mess around with and see what he can do. I love the Torrey Horton pick in round 5. He was one of my sneaky favorite candidates in this class. And then you get Damian Martinez in round 7. Like, that was one of the best value picks. I don't know what he's going to offer their team, or he's not even guaranteed as a 7th round pick to stick around. But I thought that they just found value everywhere. And so it was a pretty strong class from Seattle overall.
Yeah, it's a typical John Schneider draft. First of all, they had to go interior offensive line. They have the worst interior offensive line in the league. Gray Zabel probably is going to end up at center for them, so it's fine. But day 2, taking shots at Nick Emanwari, Elijah Arroyo, and Jalen Milroe. All 3 of those guys are like elite athletes, A+ athletes. All they need is one of them to hit. And if it's Jalen Milroe that hits, this is an A+ draft, but they are swinging for the fences. I do admire that strategy. I think they took on maybe a little bit more risk than they needed to. But when you get those guys, Emanwari, Arroyo, and Milroe in day 2, excuse me, it's hard to be too upset about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings me to the end of my winners list. Do you have any more first, or are we going to jump into the losers?
No, I've got one more. We kind of talked about this team already, but I love what the Cleveland Browns did, because
yes.
trading, it takes a lot of, we'll say, stones to trade away from Travis Hunter at pick number 2. But I understand the reasoning. You don't have a franchise quarterback, so you need to accumulate as many assets as possible to go get that guy, whether it's this year or future years. Obviously, they didn't think there was one worth drafting inside the top 90 picks. So what they did, they traded back. They got Mason Graham, who I think is a perfect fit for a Jim Schwartz defense. He can be up the field. He's never going to have double team blocks because of Myles Garrett. He is a hard nose, plays every play to the fullest of his abilities. I just think it's a perfect fit with Myles Garrett. And then you look at what they did on day 2 and day 3, adding Quinshon Judkins and Dylan Sampson together. I mean, that just completely reshaped their backfield. And now they've got the between the tackle Grinder and Judkins, and the guy that can play on passing downs and Sampson. I love the Carson Schwetzinger pick. He's somebody that needs to play with a really good front, so he can just run and chase. And he will be playing in Cleveland now. So I think at the top of round 2, that's good value. And then Harold Fannin Jr., who is one of my favorite players in the class. He's a perfect fit in a Kevin Stefanski offense, where they ask their tight ends to do a million different things. He's going to be lined up in the backfield. He's going to be lined up in the slot. He is a fantastic backup to David Njoku. And then we could talk about the quarterbacks later, but just those 4 or 5 picks, I thought they got some really good starters, and they added a potential top 10, top 15 pick in next year's draft, getting Jacksonville's 1. So hard not to like what Andrew Berry did here.
Yeah, Marcus, this is actually my number 1 team. I'm not just saying that now. In my mind, we'd already talked about this because what Cleveland did was so good. Now, I take a little bit of an issue with them trading away from Travis Hunter, who I believe is the best prospect that I've ever scouted before. And I think that he can be a transcendent player who changes the league by playing both offense and defense. I think that's the plan for him. But what they were able to do in this draft, while also picking up a next year's first round pick so that you can take a really significant quarterback swing if the guys that you have don't work out right now, I think was really impressive. Mason Graham was an on-value pick with the 5th overall selection once you moved back. Carson Schwetzinger I liked. Judkins I liked. Fannin I liked. Dylan Gabriel, the only pick I didn't love in the draft, but you're taking shots at a quarterback there. Dylan Sampson I thought was a at least on-value pick. And then Shedeur Sanders, best value pick in the draft if it works out, as long as you're not dealing with headaches there, as long as he doesn't become like a Tim Tebow sideshow or like in a negative way, then I really think that they got a great blend of talented players with upside swings there. And I like what they did a lot. The Shedeur one is going to be particularly interesting. I think the success of their draft could hinge on what happens with him right there. So Marcus dropped out here for a second, and he's back in. So I think it was just maybe the best class overall, especially when you factor in value and the potential upside. I don't know what Shedeur's chances of being a franchise quarterback are when you're a 5th-round pick. I just don't. I think it's slim to none. And there's only a couple success stories like that in the NFL right now with Brock Purdy, Dak Prescott of day 3 guys. Like, your opportunity is tied to your draft position, but I do like him a lot, and I like Cleveland's class.
Yeah, and again, it's pick 94 and pick 144. If either of those guys struggle, or it's just clear they're not NFL quarterbacks, you cut them and move on, and you still have a really good draft class. It's just hard to be too upset with what they did. They'll figure out that quarterback spot. One of these 2 guys is either going to be cut or put on the injured reserve list or traded. I'm not worrying too much about what they did late day 2, early day 3.
All right, now that brings us to the end of our list here of the winners side of the Marcus. You didn't mention the Pittsburgh Steelers. What's wrong with you?
The draft was okay. I thought it was fine.
Yeah, of course you did. All right, let's go to the losers side of the ball. And I'll start first because I've got a pretty sizable list here as well. I kind of opinionated when it comes to this stuff. And obviously, we don't know how this is going to play out. 2 years from now, we could be looking at this and could be reverse of what we're saying. But on paper, at least, Marcus, I do not like what the Atlanta Falcons did. I know that you are a Jalen Walker fan. I thought he went kind of on value. Honestly, I had him in my 20s. I thought he was one of the most overrated players in this class because there's so much projection involved in his game. I do think he's going to be good, and I think he landed in a good scheme for him. But it was what they did after Jalen Walker that particularly got me upset. You came back into the first round and gave up a next year's first-round pick for James Pierce, who has some character stuff. And from what we heard, there's coaches didn't like dealing with him. And so I just don't know about this pick. You get 2 undersized guys now, and do they pair together well? Like, I think that James Pierce is a good player. There's no chance I was giving up a next year first-round pick to move back up into the first round and get him, though. And then you take 2 safeties in a row after that with only 2 of your 5 picks in the draft. And then Jack Nelson, the offensive tackle, in the 7th round. Like, they didn't address very many needs. I don't think they got very good value with the selections they made. And the Pierce one, giving up next year's pick for a possibly troubled edge rusher is very concerning.
So look, I have very mixed thoughts on this Atlanta class. So I'm with you. Like, the James Pierce move up was abominable in my mind. Like, that's I know the Falcons were saying that they would have felt comfortable drafting him at 15. I would not have. On top of the off the field stuff, I thought his tape was maybe a little overrated. Like, he just has no power to his game at all. And you saw it in the workouts, like having a 31-inch vertical with that frame is very surprising. So I'm with you there. Like, that's really tough. I did like the selections of Xavier Watts and Billy Bowman. I know that's 2 safeties, but I thought both of those guys could have been top 75 picks. So I get those.
Good players. It's just a positional value thing for me there too.
Yes. One of the things I did like about this Atlanta class is that their defense was so bad last year. So I at least admired the strategy of like, hey, we were last in the NFL in sacks last year. We've been last in the NFL in sacks over the last 5 years, 10 years, 15 and 20 years. So like, drafting 2 edge rushers, I get, but the trade up is so doggone expensive that I don't think I would have felt comfortable doing that.
Yeah, no. And I mean, you're looking at a team now that's going to have limited draft capital next year as well. And what kind of situation is that to put your team in when you're going to have a young quarterback and you want to build a quality roster around him? I just don't like what they've done recently in the draft. And this year kind of continued that streak for me. Another team that I have here, Marcus, is the Cincinnati Bengals. And I mean, they credit them. They reached for the stars with that first round pick. We knew that was going on the defensive line somewhere, like edge, defensive tackle. They were just so weak there with the guys, the departures they had, Sam Hubbard retiring. So they went with Shamar Stewart. And I've got really mixed feelings about Stewart. I like him a lot for the idea that you could potentially be getting a Mario Williams type player, or you could be getting Bud Dupree. Like, I don't know what you're getting with this guy because he just was not productive at all. And when you watch the film, you see way too many times where he can't break down and make the play. Now, oftentimes he'll allow somebody else to do it because he can bull rush his way to the backfield. He's got the speed to rush off the edge. He doesn't really have a pass rush plan. And is this the least productive player or edge rusher we've ever seen go in the first round? The least productive ever.
Yeah. The other one we'll talk about in a second. Yes. Depending on what you think of Shedeur Stewart, probably depends on what grade you're going to give the Bengals. I thought this was like the range where he should have been drafted, like 16 to 24. I thought the talk of him being like a top 10, top 12 pick was rich. Like I don't see that at all. But at 17, it feels like it's not a value, but that's probably where he should go. I think you probably have more of an issue with what they did on day 2 and day 3 than maybe what I did.
Yeah, I definitely did. Like the Demetrius Knight pick. You're taking a 25-year-old off-ball linebacker who's just a downhill thumper. Like you're not a 3-down player in my mind. And everything they did, I thought that they reached around for. The Dylan Fairchild pick, that's okay. I mean, nothing moves the needle for me at all. And so I just was not an overall fan of anything that they did in this draft class. And I think that you only really shot big for one player, and that's Stewart. And you got to hope that it turns out, because if he ends up being a very bad or average player because he just can't figure it out as a pass rusher, it's going to look like potentially the worst draft class in the league, in my opinion.
And this is where it gets really hard with the draft, because I really liked Demetrius Knight. He is one of the most physical linebackers I've ever seen coming out of the SEC. He's experienced. He's smart. When he hits you, you stop. And I think that does matter in certain divisions. When you're going up against the Baltimore Ravens and you're facing Derrick Henry, you need to have some of these linebackers that will come downhill and thump you. And I think he can do that. I thought 49 was rich, but there's no way he was getting to pick 81 either. So in terms of value, it's not there, but I do think he's a good player. So I understand in terms of like the consensus board or value, they didn't get much. But I do think between Stewart, Knight, and Dylan Fairchild, they got 3 guys that are probably going to be day 1 starters for them. But I understand how we could be looking back at this draft 2 years from now and it's like, ooh, did they get anybody who made a real impact? Probably not.
Yeah, but it's like starters by default, I think that you would say.
Part of it,
I had a 4th round grade on Knight, and the reason is because he's such a niche role player. Like you could have went and got a Landon Roberts. I know he's old, for $3 million and play that exact same role and do it at a high level.
I think Knight's got a little bit more coverage ability than that, but yeah, I don't disagree.
He obviously does his best work right next to the line of scrimmage, and so I just wonder, like, to take a linebacker that early that potentially can't be a 3-down player or ends up being a liability in coverage if he is that guy. And that's kind of how I view him a little bit.
I do like him next to Logan Wilson, though. I think Logan Wilson, who's one of the better covered linebackers, you need a guy that's a good compliment. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think that they had a lot of reach picks, even Shedeur Stewart. Like I had Shedeur Stewart in my mid-20s because it's just so concerning seeing a pass rusher have that limited a production there. And so as much as I like the upside there, I don't even know if I would have been comfortable with the swing that high, honestly. I understand the thought process there, but not a huge fan overall. Do you want me to bounce it back to you now? Because
I got one. I got
more
one
on my list.
It's a very similar draft. It's the San Francisco 49ers who took Mykel Williams at 11. Mykel Williams did not have a lot of production coming out of Georgia. But again, that's probably the high end of where he should have been drafted. I get it. You're in a Robert Saleh defense. You need more defensive line help. He's going to start right away opposite of Nick Bosa. I think that's going to be a fine starter with hopefully the upside that he can develop as a pass rusher. My issue with the rest of the 49ers draft is what they did on day 2 and day 3. They had a plan to address their defense, which they needed to because that side of the ball has been they've lost a ton through free agency and injuries. I thought Alfred Collins, a nose tackle, I thought he probably should have been more of a 3rd, 4th round pick. Certainly when you talk about his injury history, maybe drop him down further. Nick Martin, I thought was a day 3 linebacker. They picked at 75. Upton Stout is one of my favorite players in the class. And this comes back to the Demetrius Knight thing. Upton Stout is a slot corner that can come down and tackle. But I thought that's more of a 5th, 6th round grade because his coverage ability still needs a lot of work. And then on day 3, It's Jordan James, a running back who I kind of like. That's basically it. I just wonder, Tommy, if we get back like a year, 2 years from now, and we say, oh, they've got one starter, and it's Mikael Williams, who is a good but not great edge. And that's kind of what's keeping the 49ers from getting back to being a legitimate Super Bowl contender in the NFC.
Yeah, I thought they had a pretty blah draft overall. I don't think they really reached for the stars with any of their selections. I like Mikael, but the rest of the draft, I mean, I could take or leave, preferably leave. So I probably agree with you there for the most part. Just nothing that moved the needle for me. I've got one for you, Marcus, here.
Sure.
You might disagree with me in this. I know a lot of people do, that they think this team had a good draft, but I don't like what the Tennessee Titans did. I don't like what they did for the draft capital that they had. And to me, it just felt like you're plugging these needs and you're not really taking the best players on the board. I mean, we all know that they were going Cam Ward with the number 1 pick in the class. That didn't surprise anybody. I've got my reservations about that. I understand why you've got to make something happen at the quarterback position. I think this team is going to be there again next year and maybe the year after that. Maybe they could have Arch Manning. I don't know. It's hard to say. But now with Cam Ward, maybe he moves them up where they wouldn't be in a position to do that anyway, whatever. The rest of the draft, though, too, it's like, I'm just not a big fan of what you did. So with really good capital in the second round, you took Oladajo, the edge rusher from UCLA. I thought he was an okay player. I thought he went a round higher than he should have. Kevin Winston in round 3 coming off an injury. Good safety. Just the Chimere Dickey pick in the wide receiver from Florida in round 4. Gunnar Helm. I like a manner. You might have gotten some value there. Jackson Slater, Marcus Harris, Kalen Mullings, like just names that I was not fond of at all during the pre-draft process. There's really nobody that stands out to me in a positive light out of any of these picks. And especially if you consider Cam Ward, the value of that number 1 overall pick in the class, you better hope that he salvages that draft class, because if he is a below average starting quarterback, this is going to look really bad.
Well, and that's the thing. Like, this draft class is the only thing that matters is if Cam Ward's a good quarterback, because if he's only an average quarterback and a couple of these other picks hit, it doesn't matter. But if he hits and nobody else hits, again, it doesn't matter, because you got a franchise quarterback. I like Cam Ward. I think he's like one of the least talked about quarterbacks, or at least talked about number 1 overall picks in a long time. So I get what you're saying. I think from picks 52 on, it's maybe not the most exciting class, but all that matters if Cam Ward is good or not.
That's true. I mean, if Cam Ward is good, you'll forget about the rest of the class. It's like I think of, as a Steelers fan, I think of the 2003 draft class. You hit on Troy Polamalu. The rest of the class is bad. Well, you got Ike Taylor there too, so that's not true. But I just don't like it overall. Like, I think everything they did was a reach pick. You look at the consensus board, even every single spot reach pick. And I don't have confidence that any of those guys are going to develop into anything more than maybe decent starting players at the most. And then Cam Ward, you gotta hope, because everything hinges on him. I've got another one for you here. It's the Minnesota Vikings. And they didn't have a ton of draft capital to work with. You got Donovan Jackson. They needed offensive line help. So you get a guy that can play tackle or guard. The rest of the class, it's just real forgettable names there.
They only had 1 pick inside the top 100, so it was going to be really hard for them to have.
It was going to be tough.
Class. Yeah. Now I'm a big fan of Donovan Jackson, and we saw this offensive line run happen early. They needed a guy that could come in and be a day 1 starter at guard. One of the reasons I like Donovan Jackson, though, is Christian Darrisaw had a major injury last year, didn't return. They needed somebody that has the position flex to maybe kick out to tackle. That's where I like Donovan Jackson. But yeah, you look at the other names, Ty Felton, Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, Kobe King. They're pretty unspectacular. But what should we expect? They got JJ McCarthy and Dallas Turner in last year's draft. That's why they were so limited on capital this year.
Agreed. But it's not even just the cap. I mean, you're still spending a 3rd round pick on Ty Felton, and that is a player who some people thought was a priority free agent or a 6th, 7th round pick. Like, I just think everywhere they picked, with the exception of the Donovan Jackson pick, you're picking like a round or 2 higher at least than what they should have been able to get with that selection. So on paper, for me, doesn't look like a good class at all. I understand why they were short on capital this year, and hopefully they all the moves they made leading up to this point were well worth it for them. But that is another one on my losers list. And I have one more, Marcus. Do you have anything else before I give you my last one?
I do. And this one's tough because I really like Jihad Campbell, and I like what the Eagles did trading up for Jihad Campbell. Even if it was one spot, they took a chance on a guy that I think has top 10, top 12 potential, right? It's the positional value of linebacker, which again I can kind of ignore because of that role in the defense. But banged up Alabama linebackers do not have a good track record in the NFL. Yeah. In round 2, you took Andrew Mabuka, a safety from Texas, who was clearly the second best safety. He's very undersized. Now he'll hit you, but I've got some concerns that he might not be able to make it as a safety in the NFL. And then from that point on, Ty Robinson is a athletic but undersized defensive tackle. Small London is a coverage linebacker only who hardly played at Georgia. I think this was a way riskier draft than what we generally see from Howie Roseman. And what we usually see from Howie Roseman is a bunch of top 100 picks on the offensive and defensive line. None in this year's class inside the top 110 picks. So it's just different from what we're used to seeing from Philadelphia.
Yeah, it's funny because when the Eagles were on the board with that the last pick in the first round, we're like, all right, let's take a look at the old consensus board and see who they're going to draft here. And nobody was surprised to see them go with Jihad Campbell, fill that hole at linebacker, and get a really good player in the process. But it was kind of the rest of the draft that's like, all right, well, maybe you're not picking all these consensus board excellent value picks like we thought.
We should mention with Jihad Campbell, again, I think if he's completely healthy, he's a top 15 player in the class.
Yeah.
But he didn't fall just because there was other players that went ahead of him that were better. He fell because there is some major durability stuff between his shoulder injury. We're hearing some rumors about maybe some knee stuff going on. Those type of players, the guys that are already beat up at a position like linebacker coming into the NFL, they always scare me quite a bit.
Yeah, no, and again, we're talking about the last pick in the first round. I'm fine with the injury gamble there. Maybe I would have taken Burden instead, just make that offense so terrifying. But I understand the thought process. I think everybody thought it was a good value pick. But yeah, you look at the rest of the classes, like you got a lot of capital to work with overall here, and nothing that kind of stands out too much in terms of, wow, you got tremendous value like we're so used to the Eagles seeing. So I think it was different than we've seen from this team the last few years and what Howie Roseman typically operates with. So I agree with that for sure. My last team on here, Marcus, in the losers list is the Denver Broncos.
I agree.
So let's go pick by pick here. I'm like, Jahdae Barron, 20th overall selection. I'm like, all right, okay. I feel you. I understand what you're doing there. He's an older corner. He's going to be limited to the slot, but really good football player. So that one I could at least get behind in a sense. I would have been comfortable taking him a little bit later. But then everything after that, it's like, ooh, like RJ Harvey in the second round. So you're taking a 25-year-old running back with some injury concerns. I thought he should have been a third or fourth round pick. So that was very rich for me there. And then Pat Bryant in the third round. You drafted a wide receiver from Illinois that runs a 4.61. And a lot of people had him as a late day 3 receiver. That seemed really rich for me. Savion Jones. Quay Robinson, I know you like Quay Robinson, right?
Mm-hmm.
You like?
I
can't remember if that's you.
Yep.
Jeremy Big fan. Crawshaw. They drafted a punter here, which is fine. It's a 6th round pick, and then a tight end that I've never watched the tape of before. It's like
Cable Lawner. Yep.
Yeah, it's just no value picks straight across the board. No value picks for me.
Yeah. I thought the talk about Jahdae Barron being a top 15 pick was rich, but I do think in Denver's defense, playing in the slot, playing as a safety makes some sense. But one of the concerns we had about the Broncos coming out of the playoffs last year, playing in that game against Buffalo, was like, okay, where is their weapon? If it's not Marvin Mims making plays down the field or Cortland Sutton making these acrobatic catches, where is the juice in the offense? I think RJ Harvey can provide that a little bit. It's just that, man, there's nobody on this team that scares you in the passing game. And I think that's going to be a big issue. Now, maybe Sean Payton can scheme it up where it doesn't matter. I thought they would potentially be a team that would move up for maybe one of the tight ends, maybe a Mecca Abuke, who went, I think, a one pick ahead of them, was an option. It's the same thing I feel like with Cowboys draft. Yes, you got some good players and potentially some that can come in and start right away, but your Achilles heel is your passing game weapons, and you're just not going to make it out of the conference without better weapons in the passing game. Maybe they just didn't feel like the value was there, and that's why they went elsewhere. But it's hard to love this draft.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you're not getting a lot more explosive with Pat Bryant in the third round there.
No.
So you're going to have to win a lot of contested balls there for however much he ends up seeing the field. It's just that. Yeah, go ahead. Interject.
Can I give you one more just really quickly before we head out? This is more like of a timeline draft. So the Rams traded back. They're the team that got the first round pick from Atlanta, moving back from 26 to 46. So I commend them there, right? Like getting a first round pick in next year's draft is awesome. At the same time, you are in a 1 to 2 year window with Matthew Stafford. Like this is it. This is your time right now. You've got a older Devontae Adams who signed a 2-year deal. I know the defense is really young, but it's going to be really hard to find that quarterback. So go right now and try to win. So they missed out on all those players in the 20s and 30s. At pick 46, they selected Terrence Ferguson, a tight end I like from Oregon, but that's a position that usually takes a year or two to develop. And then their next pick was Josiah Stewart, edge rusher from Michigan, whose tape is really good, but the athletic testing is awful. I mean, just downright awful. And then it's Jarquez Hunter in round 4. They already had Kyron Williams. They traded up for Blake Corum last year. Hunter's probably going to be the third running back. I just look at their draft and I feel like I just don't know if you got anybody that's going to help you at all this season.
Yeah, we talk about windows all the time in the NFL, and the Rams are in a window. You're running it back with a 37-year-old Matthew Stafford. Like, you have to win now. Otherwise, what is the point of what you're trying to do? So kind of trying to prepare for the future right now with an aging quarterback. And you've got Devontae Adams on the offense. Like, what are you doing? You got to go one direction or the other. You got caught in the middle there, which maybe the plan is just, we're going to give ourselves at least a chance with Stafford this year. And then we're going to ensure that we have the capital to trade up and get a quarterback next year if we need it. But yeah, I don't love their draft overall. The draft capital is not going to help you if you end up falling short again in the playoffs and you just can't get it done. And so I think they should have done more of the win now approach. And I don't always say that, but it's in their case in particular. You have a quarterback that I thought still played well in the playoffs last year. Give him one more shot at it, and then you can kind of go full rebuild mode.
It's hard to turn down that first round pick from Atlanta. So I got to admit, I probably would have done the same because it's just like, man, it's so much capital to move down, 20 spots.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't fault them for that, for sure. I think it was,
it's just
that I would have been tempted to do the exact same, especially in a class that I thought was a okay draft class, but next year you hope that maybe you can do something even better, or at least now have the capital to do anything you want really with next year. It's just, it doesn't help you for now. So I definitely get that. All right. We go live on the No Huddle show on Stacking the Box every Monday. I'm thinking of my other podcast here. Every Monday at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. Make sure you come back for more content. We're going to have lots of players, lots of draft fallout to break down in the coming weeks. So thanks again for listening to the No Huddle show on Stacking the Box.